Thank you much. All right, so as I said, my name's Emma Clayton. I'm the Membership Engagement Lead for CIPD Manchester, and we're going to focus this evening on talking about CIPD membership, its value, and how to upgrade. So here's the agenda. Before I get started on those 3 points, I will have a poll because I know we've got quite a mixed audience, and I want to make sure that I'm able to take what I'm saying to the people who are here this evening. And then, as I said, with the upgrading part, I'll say a brief piece about that, but then we've got our guest speaker, Lynn Fish, with us. And Lynn is going to be talking about her upgrading experience, sharing her story. And after that, there'll be a chance then for some questions. You can ask some questions to Lynn about her experience, and then we'll stay on at the end for a bit of networking as well. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that. The welcome and housekeeping obviously is a pretty straightforward thing at this point. We ask obviously when anyone is speaking that you keep your microphone muted just so we don't get any background noise. The chat box will always be available, obviously. Please ask questions throughout the event. Make any comments, thinking about your own experiences, for example, with CIPD membership. You can also share useful links that you may have. And throughout the session, obviously, the branch ambassadors who are supporting the event will also be sharing links and talking about some of their experiences as well. So you may already have noticed, but this evening we have Julia, Lauren and Sally, who are all supporting the event. And they're here to also help you out throughout the session. The session is being recorded as well. There is quite a lot of information that gets covered, so don't panic too much. You'll be able to refer back to it. I also just want to point out you've also got the reaction buttons, which can be really nice to kind of show how you're interacting with some of the content as well. Okay, so the first poll we've got is, you can see right at the top of the screen to go to Mentimeter, menti.com, and you've also got the code on the screen, and we'll be using this a couple times in the event. What I'd like you to do now, though, is to log into Mentimeter and to answer this question, right? As I said, I want to make sure that I tailor what I'm saying to the audience that's here this evening. So even though obviously we've got all 3 topics and some will be covered more than others, depending on what the interest is. So please log in and go ahead and make your voices heard. You can vote for all 3 or just one, whatever works for you. I'm not at all surprised so far that I can see upgrading has definitely got the most notice. That's not at all surprising. I know that's always a hot topic. Okay, so we've got a bit of a spread there. We do have some in all camps. So I'll just wait a moment because I know there'll be a few other people obviously joining in and wanting to make their voices heard as well. Okay. And the upgrading pile keeps growing. All right, I think that's a fairly clear answer. So I will touch on all 3 points because obviously all 3 have come up, but I'll try to make it therefore that we've got more time than on upgrading. So I'll do the best I can with that. What I will say is if some of your questions don't get answered in the event, feel free to put them in the chat or to connect with me on LinkedIn and ask me those questions directly. I'm absolutely happy to help out in that way as well. So without further ado, I'm going to move on. So when we think about joining the CIPD, there are basically 2 main routes in, either through doing a qualification or having your experience assessed. So doing a qualification is usually the route people are most familiar with and probably the most common route in. So I won't spend too much time on that because obviously there is a lot of information online about what each of those different qualifications involves, right? Whether you're looking at foundation or associate or advanced. And those qualifications, of course, did just change recently as well. So the terminology is a bit different. What I will say though about having your experience assessed, because obviously that's another way of coming into CIPD membership. What's important to remember about that though is the experience assessment is the equivalent of a full qualification in terms of the membership levels. So it is a long and thorough process. Filling out the forms alone can actually take you about 2 to 3 months. So I think that's important to bear in mind. There's a lot of guidance on the CIPD's website around how to do this, going in detail in terms of what's expected with each question, how you can answer it, and also where you can provide supplementary evidence as well. It's really important that you choose your stakeholder feedback really carefully. You want somebody who can provide a good depth of response, not just somebody who's going to, quickly check a few boxes and get it done kind of thing. You want real detail there. And you also want stakeholders who can give differing perspectives on your work. Okay, so you don't want two people who are just going to say the same things about you. That variety there is important. There are strict word limits on the questions, so people often get partway through telling a story and then they kind of run out of words. Don't be afraid to be brief in the written part, because you can always use your professional discussion then to expand on that. But like I said, it is an alternative, and a lot of people have also gone this route. Because sometimes obviously that's preferred to studying the qualification, and that's absolutely fine. As you can see on the screen, there's also an interactive tool on the CIPD's website, which can also give you some more detail around which route would be best for you. In addition, I want to mention, we've also got 2 other types of membership that often don't get talked about, and that's affiliate membership and academic membership. And these may be of interest to you or other people that you know and work with. So with affiliate membership, you're thinking more about somebody who's not working in HR and L&D, but does have people management responsibilities, and therefore would benefit from being able to access some of the content, obviously from the CIPD. Or it might be somebody who's even in a senior people management role, but wants to have kind of more occasional access to CIPD rather than that full-on membership. And then there's the academic membership as well. Obviously, when you're thinking about people who are working, writing about, researching topics within HR and L&D. And again, the academic membership follows a similar structure in that you've got associates, you've got members, you've got fellows, and so on. All right, moving on to benefits. Going back to Mentimeter, what are the benefits of CIPD membership? Please throw out your answers. I'm very curious to see what comes up here and if it matches my predictions. So go ahead, pop in some words or short phrases. Anything you're aware of that's a benefit of being a CIPD member. All right. Okay, I like this. So we've got something concrete in the sense of employment law advice. We've also got something that's more of an opinion around minimal, right? And that's absolutely fine as well. Because to be honest, the more honest you can be, the more helpful it is as I'm going through this. Okay, so definitely I can see a lot of things around getting legal advice and support with the research, the fact sheets, daily updates obviously coming through email, things like that. Perkbox, not surprisingly, is showing up on there, and I can see somebody's plea to get Perkbox back. I know that was taken away obviously in, I believe it was August of last year. Currently, there aren't any plans to come up with a substitute for Perkbox. Perkbox was taken away because not all membership levels could actually participate in the program based on Perkbox's guidelines. But when the CIPD did some surveying of members around what mattered to them, what was coming out a lot more was along the essentially the professional support end of things, career support end of things. And so there's a bit more of a shift around that now. I realize that's not the same as perk box though, so I would also encourage you, if that's something that is really important to you, to reach out to the CIPD membership team and contact them directly. So there's a lot of really great stuff on there in terms of, definitely people are aware of many of the benefits, and then other people obviously who feel as though, yeah, there's a bit of variety there depending on where you're located, and also maybe there's not a lot out there in terms of what you're looking for from benefits. And I think if that's the case for you, then again, I would say reach out to CIPD and make that known, right? You can contact the membership team through the website and let them know what is it that's important to you and that you're looking for, because you never know, that might prompt some changes further down the line. So with the membership benefits then, I won't go into super detail with all of them, because clearly from what just popped up, a lot of people are really clued up, for example, around the Knowledge Hub, where you find all your fact sheets and research and reports and all of that. And obviously the employment law support was coming up a lot, the case law, you've got Q&A scenarios, things like that. Wellbeing, I don't believe that came up. So with the Wellbeing Helpline, it's a 24/7, 365 service. It's run by Health Assured, and the therapists are qualified through the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. And basically on the website, they've got some short programs that you can do. They've got mini health checks. There's some coaching webinars, things like that, in addition to the helpline itself. With employment law support, it's also one of the helplines. There are in fact 5 helplines for legal advice. So the general employment law one, you do get about 20, you get 20 calls a year if I'm not mistaken, and 25 then if you're a chartered member. I actually just called them for the first time last week and they were really helpful. I will say that. There's also a CIPD personal legal helpline. So if you're wanting to get any information around wills, property, taxes, debt, anything like that, and that's open to members and their spouses or partners, and there are no limits on calls to that helpline. We've also got the whistleblower helpline, where not only whistleblowers get support, but there's also support that you can access for your organization, for example, around courses and things like that. There's an EU employment law helpline. With that one, it's about £65 a call, if I remember correctly, but obviously targeted advice then around the EU. And the final helpline, part of it's about health and safety, and any calls around that are free. But then there are also additional areas of tax, VAT, pay, and commercial legal support. And then those calls are about £24.50 a time. So there's quite a range in the helplines. Obviously, people know about People Management magazine. If you saw my post, that's always the first one that pops up for people, available print and online. But also you've got PM jobs as well, right? People management jobs. So whether you're looking to hire and want to advertise, or you're searching for a job, and you can upload your CV on that platform as well. So there's quite a lot that goes in there. So that's thinking about the support end. The career end has changed just recently. You may be aware of the newly launched CIPD Learning Hub, which launched late last year. Got a range of courses on there. There are self-assessments that match the profession map. There's CPD support, so you can kind of track what you're doing. There's a reflection tool as well. There's a lot going on there, so I really encourage you to check that out if you haven't already. There are additional CIPD courses as well that you can access and get discounts to. And then obviously, in addition to that, something that was coming up in the word cloud was also around professional credibility, right? So it's one way of building your personal brand, showing that you are a professional, that you are up to date with everything that's happening in legislation, what's happening in the field, hot topics and trends. It gives you that credibility. And obviously with the code of conduct and everything, there's a lot around ethics as well. So that's something that you're conveying through membership. And obviously being able to access then specific career development support and being able to progress. So it's not just about joining and starting out, it's also about progressing your career. And when you think about that as well, the CIPD Career Hub, I think, is an underused resource when it comes to that area. So you've got a ton of information on there that you can access, whether it's through courses or videos, tips, articles, whatever it might be. You can even upload your CV, get feedback on that. There's an option as well to practice interview questions and get feedback. And it's a really useful tool, whether you're starting out or you're further up in your career and trying to maybe make the next leap. I've also heard from some people who have gone through the upgrading process that they also found it really helpful, not just in preparing for some senior level roles, but also in preparing for upgrading as well. So there's a lot on there that's definitely worth checking out if you haven't. With the networks, obviously networking came up, right? It does offer you a way to meet other people in the field, and we all know that it's helpful to be able to speak with other people, to get some support and feedback, to kind of develop our own communities when we're working. We also have the CIPD community app, and that's a great place to ask very specific questions. So you'll get a lot of things that fall under kind of employee relations. Sometimes you've got things around career advice and studying also. And it can be accessed via the website as well. It's not just an app, but I think the app is often an easy way to get involved. So really great place to get support there. You can also access your digital membership card there as well. So that's pretty handy. Obviously, your local branches are a big part of what you get as well. CIPD Manchester is a very active branch. At the end, you'll have a link to our flipping book and you can see the events that are coming up. So we do offer quite a lot of different things, and it's worth checking out what we're doing. But as things have moved online, you can also access what's happening in branches around the country, because pretty much everything is happening online currently. And so you've got an opportunity to learn from different branches across the UK. And there are also mentoring opportunities, or volunteering opportunities, I should say, that I would also recommend looking into. So some of those might be about you, right? The Aspiring HRD program, that's about members who are wanting to move into an HR director role. Whereas then with Steps Ahead and Enterprise Advisor, then obviously we're thinking about, we as members are going out into the community and trying to support youth and giving advice around the world of work and things like that. And then some of the local branches also have member-to-member mentoring available also. One thing I will say with the Aspiring HRD program, though, it is a structured opportunity, and you're matched with a senior leader, and it's about a 9 to 10 month program. There is a bit of an application process with that. So definitely worth checking that out if you're at that point in your career. And finally, then we've got a bunch of savings, obviously. So we've got 20% discount on Kogan Page, HR Inform, that's another useful employment law support. You've got a 50% discount there. Professional indemnity insurance, and there's discounts around conference tickets, training courses, and things like that. I think one thing to point out here that a lot of people don't seem aware of is the financial assistance part. So reduced membership fees do exist for a variety of reasons. So there have been some that have been related to the COVID-19 impact. You can also look into this if, for example, you're taking a career break, you're on maternity leave, maybe you're currently a job seeker, maybe you're age 60 and over. there are a variety of reasons why you might be interested in reduced membership, and there are a variety of ways you could potentially qualify for that as well. So really good to bear in mind if your circumstances change. And then this leads us on, of course, to then a lot of what we've kind of touched on already can support you with upgrading. But then when you think about upgrading itself, this is yet another way, obviously, to raise your profile and increase your credibility. And it's often something that people look for as well. I've heard from some people that, you know, when they've been through the hiring process, some organizations have said, we weren't willing to hire somebody for this role who wasn't a chartered member or who wasn't operating at a specific level. So that's always really good to bear in mind. If you start out as a student member, essentially you'll either be moving into foundation or associate, depending on what qualification you've done. And then if you're an associate member, of course, it's a question of moving up to chartered member. And if you're a chartered member, you'd be moving up to being a chartered fellow. Again, lots of guidance on the CIPD website around this. You've got guides that will talk you through all the relevant standards when you're looking at being a chartered member or a chartered fellow, what the structure of the discussion is. So that helps you prepare in advance, and you definitely want to prepare in advance if you hadn't thought about that already. It can also be really helpful, for example, to choose the phone assessment if you can, because that allows you to prepare some notes for yourself that you can use as a short script. And then it also means that the assessor has the chance to ask you additional questions as well, if there's anything that they're not clear about in your answers. So that's got a lot of benefit to it. And again, as I mentioned before, with the having your experience assessed, it's really important that you choose your colleague who's giving feedback for the upgrading process. Really important that you choose them carefully, all right? Because it should be somebody who can really write in depth about you and what you've done, and somebody that you trust to give you feedback before the actual assessment as well, because that helps you and your assessor to kind of have something to refer to and add depth with when you're having your conversation. So I'm going to leave it there for now, and I'm going to hand over to Lynn, because she can tell you more about what the upgrading experience is like, because she has, of course, been through it herself. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to announce Lynn Fish, who will take you through her journey.
So good evening, everybody, and it's great to see so many people from around Manchester as well. So yeah, I'm in Gatley and Cheadle, so sort of South Manchester. I'm going to tell you about my upgrading journey. I've upgraded to fellow relatively recently. I'll talk you through my career so you can understand my background, my CIPD background, the process that I went through, and then some advice and tips really that might help you along the way. So I've been a member since 1999. So I was still a student at university when I joined the CIPD. It was suggested by one of the lecturers. So my first degree was in psychology and management. So there was definitely a tendency, a leaning towards HR, or personnel as it was called in those days. So yeah, I joined right back then, and I've been a member ever since, really. And my employers have always supported that membership. They've always allowed me to claim back the fees, and supported my upgrading journey as well through qualifications, and then finally through to fellowship level, where it wasn't on qualifications. So yeah, thanks, Emma. We'll move on to the next slide.
Okay.
So I did a BSc in Psychology and Management at Aston University. It was a 4-year course with a 15-month placement in year 3. So really good to sort of start getting some work experience whilst being part of my university degree. And I had my first role in HR in that placement as an intern for an organisation called GE Capital, Global Consumer Finance. So they did the store cards for shops like Debenhams, Dorothy Perkins, owns those kind of stores. And like I say, I joined the CIPD in my final year then on the advice of one of the lecturers. And I think student engagement now is a kind of key strategy of CIPD to get people involved right at those early stages. I joined Northern Foods, as it was known then, on the graduate scheme as a personnel officer. Stayed there for a few years, then moved to Premier Foods as a HR manager, so always working in quite operational parts of the operational businesses, manufacturing. I did a very short interim HR consultant appointment for Sony Ericsson Mobile Communications. We're doing a restructure. And then I've been at Suez Recycling and Recovery UK as Senior HR Manager for too long, about 13 years. So yeah, a long time. And I've kind of kept growing and developing along the way. I've had a couple of bouts of maternity leave as well. So I've definitely kind of grown and kept developing all during that time. Okay, if we move on, Emma, I'll tell you about my upgrading. So for me, it was about recognizing my experience and my skills and my knowledge. It was about kind of putting a marker down to say, do you know what, I've been in this industry now for over 20 years, and it was a real kind of a badge of honor really to get that fellowship status so that I could be recognized. We are going through a takeover of the company I work for. Things might change in the future. Maybe people are looking into the business to see who works there. And I'm thinking about my personal profile, my personal branding, how I'm perceived by external parties. So for me, it was definitely a way of recognizing what I do, improving my personal brand. And also the kind of benefit that I didn't maybe think about before I did it, but it has given me credible access to networks to learn and share. So I get invitations now to join things like roundtable discussions or membership bodies. And I think it is a way of recognizing that if you are on LinkedIn and you are keeping your profile up to date, you're posting regularly, you're responding to things, you're sharing what you're doing, it does gather some interest in you as an individual, and people want you to collaborate with them, to join in their networks and participate in their research, maybe even for universities. So yeah, there's lots of benefits that kind of sit outside the immediate ones that you think about. Okay. So here's a process, and you can find this process on the CIPD website. I completed a pre-assessment, a kind of online form. It wasn't particularly tricky, and that gets assessed. And then they come back to you and say, yep, tick, you can now go ahead to the next stage. And that next stage then is booking the telephone assessment. Very strangely, in these times, it wasn't even a video, it was literally a telephone call. So that was a bit odd. And I would say that part of the process was a little bit clunky. I kind of sat and waited around for a little while, kept chasing a couple of times. So I'd say, don't get disheartened, keep pushing with CIPD. Maybe it might just fell down a bit of a hole somewhere. So yeah, keep making sure that somebody is on board with your upgrading application and that your assessment is being booked in. So the date gets booked, and then the rest of your time then leading up to the date is all about preparation. So on the CIPD website, there is a document which prepares you for that telephone assessment. So it talks you through what to expect, obviously making sure that you're eligible. And probably one of the most interesting things for you to be thinking about with upgrading is one of the reflective practice models by Borton. You might have heard of it. It's Borton's 1970 model, and it's what, so what, and now what, and it talks about the impact that you're making. So when you look at the CIPD Profession Map and you look at the different levels and what's expected at each level, you can see that as you get to fellowship level, there is more impact statements. What are you doing and what difference is it making to the organisation? So I would say maybe look into reflective practice, think about the impact that you're making. Can you demonstrate it? Have you got some metrics behind it? Can you measure? Can you provide evidence? All of those things that when you write your CV for upgrading to fellow, it's not a CV that you would kind of put forward for a job, you know, because it's more about demonstrating in measurable, demonstrable levels what you have achieved and how you did it. And you get your results, and then you become a charter fellow, and you get your certificate, and you can pop those letters after your name. So I would say it was a relatively simple process. There's just a bit of preparation involved in getting there, really. And my next slide, I will give you some sort of tips that I used. So I would say use the resources available on the website. There's a whole profession map document, which has each of the core knowledge, core behaviours and specialist knowledge, and it has examples of what's expected at each of those levels. So if I just talk you through one, just to give you a flavour. So in the people practice core knowledge, the foundation level for CIPD membership for wellbeing would be what wellbeing is and why it's important. So you would demonstrate what you know about that. At associate level, it would be why wellbeing is important and the different factors that impact wellbeing. So it requires a little bit more knowledge. The chartered member level is the internal and external factors that impact wellbeing and how to integrate wellbeing into people practices. So again, it's taking that a step further, moving it into what you do in your role in HR. And then finally, for charter fellow level, it would be how to contribute to and integrate wellbeing into wider people strategies. So it's taking it to that strategic level, implementing what you know of the knowledge, making sure it has an impact, and being able to talk about that and demonstrate it. So I'd say for each of those, there's kind of tons of help and advice that you can use to pull out those examples of what you do and measures that you can demonstrate when you're pulling together your CV and writing your application for upgrading. There's self-assessment tools on the website and upgrading guidelines. There's kind of documents about how to upgrade to Charter Fellow, how to prepare for your telephone assessment. Again, it talks about using impact levels, using the words I, not we, finding your evidence, getting your metrics ready. And then also, like Emma mentioned, there's these two kind of pieces of supporting evidence. One was from my line manager, and another one was from a colleague. And there was questions that got asked, and they're asking for examples of what you've done and how it can be measured. And I help them advise what the CIPD is looking for, because they were supporting me in doing that. And it probably wouldn't have maybe passed muster if I hadn't sort of told them what boxes I need to tick. So you do need to select those people who are going to support you along the way. It's an opportunity really for you to reflect on your own skills, knowledge and experience, to stop, pause, take some time to think about what you do, how it can be demonstrated at impact level, to cross-check against those levels so that you can identify gaps. So if you're thinking, well, I'm doing great in this area, but here's a bit of a gap, and then you can think about what am I going to do to bridge that gap? What opportunities can I seek out in my role to fill the gap in knowledge, be it well-being or inclusion or strategic thinking, whatever the subject is. You can start to think about how to bridge those gaps. Prepare for your telephone assessment. It's a bit like a job interview in that way. I was definitely thinking, I need to make sure I've got all my ducks in a row, everything's ready, I know what I'm saying. And allow time as well for those forms to get completed with your line manager and your colleague. Don't leave it by the last minute, because they're going to want some help and support in doing those with you. So yeah, that's my sort of upgrading journey really. And I think we're going to hand back to Emma and then maybe go through some questions and answers.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great, Lynn. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to return. It's like, where's the video button? I've lost it. It's kind of sad, right? It's been long enough doing all of this. Anyway, yeah, I'm no doubt I can see a lot's been happening in the chat, obviously, that I've missed. And I'm no doubt that there are a lot of people who've got questions around the upgrading experience as well. I can see some people have been offering advice in the chat as well. But this is a great opportunity. We're absolutely happy if you want to come off microphone, right? If you want to unmute, raise your hand and ask Lynn a question directly, or if you prefer to put it in the chat, that's absolutely fine as well, not a problem. Okay, so there was a question around what was the name of the pack you were reading from? I think that must be for you. There we go. Okay.
I went on mute, sorry. So the new profession map, it's called, and if I can show you, I'll just pick a page. So at the top of the page, you can see each level, and then there's a description in each level about what they're looking for, really. I found that the most helpful document out of everything, the profession map.
Yeah, and there's definitely, I know I've done separate sessions just on the profession map alone, because I do think that's a really underutilized tool, but it's so critical when you're thinking about upgrading. And I know there's been a lot of effort in recently from CIPD as well to make it clear the different courses and the different things that you can do, how that matches to the profession map. And even here at CIPD Manchester, we've started doing that with our sessions. So if you attend this session, what part of the profession map is it actually targeting, so that it becomes something that we do use more and we refer to more, and it doesn't just seem like this kind of big, scary, unwieldy sort of document, because there's a lot there.
Yeah,
right?
it is huge, and there's lots of levels of detail. But I kind of think as well, I'm going to do it with my team as a bit of a skill check almost, to say, let's look at where our gaps are as a team, what do we need to develop, but also for individuals as well. We're looking at their personal development plans and identifying where they want to push up their level of experience and knowledge and skills.
Yeah, and that's a really great idea. And if you are a CIPD member as well, you do have access to some little mini courses around like core behaviors and things with the profession map as well. So that's worth looking into to maybe get a bit more familiar with what those sections mean and how they can apply to you and what you're doing. Okay, so we've got a few questions now, it looks like, in the chat. So what experience is required to upgrade to member level? So a lot of that will get covered on the CIPD website, because it is quite structured in terms of what they're looking for. So I'd advise you to kind of review that, depending on whether you're looking at chartered member, that's what I'm assuming from member, or chartered fellow. Important to look at those distinctions. And I know in some cases, I think when you're looking at becoming chartered fellow as well, there's a lot more emphasis on on how you look forward, right? Do you sort of have a 3-year plan? Where are you going? There's a lot more emphasis on being strategic. That can come up at all levels, but more so obviously the higher you go as well. I don't know if there's anything you want to add around experience in the different levels, Lynn.
Yeah, I mean, I was a member for a long time, so I can't really remember how I got to. I think it might have just got there by qualifications. I'm not even sure. There might have been a bit of an experience assessment. Now I try and remember. It's a long time ago. And I guess ultimately the CIPD are there to give you the answers, aren't they? So you need to look to them to see what they're looking for, and follow their advice to the T. Really, that's what it's there for, isn't it? I guess it's subject to change, so I wouldn't want to share too much about what I did, because like I say, it's probably changed since then. But yeah, I found that the profession map was the most helpful, and the guidance documents. They really point you in the right direction.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the reasons as well that the guidance is quite in depth and clear around all of this is obviously it's a professional membership. So the CIPD is also trying to make sure that anyone who's awarded that chartered member level is operating at that level, like that's appropriate, same with chartered fellows. So it tends to be quite clear around that. Obviously, if you've got any questions, absolutely feel free to reach out to me as well. If it's something I can help with, I will. And if not, obviously, I can always direct you elsewhere. We've got another question in the chat looking at advice on metrics, if possible. So this can sometimes be difficult in a generalist HR role. So are you able to share what type of metrics you used to share with the CIPD?
Yeah, bear with me. Just give me a second. I think it did talk about it. So it talks about things like productivity measures, engagement survey results, absence data. I think I remember speaking in my CV on metrics on things like the value of a bid I was supporting, the number of employees that were within my remit, the employee engagement scores. I did use that metric. I talked about cost savings in pounds. Anything else? Talked about the size of diversity and inclusion networks. Talked about volunteering, so contribution to volunteering in a financial way. So yeah, I guess it's anything that you can measure, isn't it, really? Any data or metrics that you can provide that you can evidence.
Yeah, those are some really good examples though, and perhaps some of those also touch on things that you would have access to in a generalist role as well. So hopefully that has helped answer your question, Danielle. The next one is looking at if someone has been, this is an interesting one, if someone has been working within HR for well over 20 years and is now working at an HRM level for the last 12 years, but is only at a CIPD associate level, can this be viewed as negative? I think that's really,
yeah,
I was going to say, I think that's a really interesting question. And maybe that goes partly to a comment I had made earlier that I have heard from some people when they're looking, interviewing at certain organizations, particularly when they're trying to get into a more senior role or like an HR director role, that those organizations weren't going to take someone below chartered member level. I would say, though, that it's going to be very personal in terms of the organization because like anything, right? Some organizations are going to be a bit more CIPD focused than others. And so depending on what you've decided are the important criteria to you, that's going to impact on what you look at when you're interviewing for a role. And the reality is, you know, with the example that Stephanie's provided, we're talking about a lot of experience there. And there's a lot that could be evidenced. And there could be many reasons why that person hasn't chosen to move up from an associate level. And it doesn't mean that you're not accessing material and thinking and operating at a higher level. You just don't have something from CIPD that says you're doing it, but that's not necessarily in and of itself a problem for the organization. I mean, I suppose I'm supposed to say, no, everybody should be upgrading, right? But at the end of the day, it's also a really personal choice. And you've also got to decide when it's the right time for you and when you feel ready and that it's got the right value for you.
Yeah, I think it's what fits comfortably with your personal values, isn't it? My line manager isn't a member of the CIPD, and one of my team has never done any CIPD qualification. So, you know, there is no right or wrong way, as I would say. But when they're looking at your experience for upgrading, they're looking at the last 5 years. So as long as you can demonstrate your continued growth and your continued operating at that level, I wouldn't see it as a problem for upgrading. I guess the problem might come, like Emma says, if the perception from a prospective employer might differ depending on what value they place on it.
Yeah. Okay, good. And good reminder about the last 5 years as well. Okay, struggling to access membership information online, keeps coming up saying there is a technical error. It may be a question that you need to contact CIPD directly, but I also know through my use of the CIPD community app, where you, for example, find your membership card, your digital membership card, they've been going through some upgrading, different type of upgrading process recently, and it has caused some problems. What I found in that case was simply uninstalling the app and reinstalling it again, fix those issues. If that doesn't directly relate to your question, then I would say to contact CIPD directly, because there could be something else afoot. Again, happy to talk with you separately about that as well if you need some more support doing that. Okay, and then I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Now my thing is freezing. Good, my chat's gone back to the very beginning. That's not helpful. I don't know if anybody wants to shout out what the next question is.
There was a question on looking to move from associate to chartered via the experience assessment, and then if we can offer any advice on that.
Okay. Yeah, so with the, hang on, it was from associate to chartered, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, I think, you know, if you sort of think back to the, I know I did cover it quickly in the beginning, but again, it goes back to really preparing and really choosing people who are supporting you. They're normally called your stakeholders in that particular case, and choosing those carefully. What I would also say that's really helpful at any level of upgrading, but probably particularly because I think associate to member can often feel maybe like a bigger jump. And I also understand, you know, there can also maybe sort of feel a bit more of a need to differentiate yourself as well, because obviously associate membership is a pretty large group. Right, I had a point with that and I've just forgotten what it was. Oh my goodness, right, I know what it was. It was also going to be about talk to your network, right? Talk to people that you know, connect with people on LinkedIn, find out about their experience, people who made that specific jump going from associate to chartered member, preferably recently, obviously, because there have been some changes over time, and kind of build up some understanding, ask some very specific questions as well as you explore more through the information that's on the website. But because there is a lot of guidance out there very specifically looking at those different levels, but I think it can be really helpful to talk to people who've done that specific thing, because sometimes it might be around, I'm really not sure how to demonstrate X. What ideas do you have? What support can you offer me? What direction should I go in around that? So hopefully that helped. I'm just conscious of time as well. I'm now more or less back where I'm supposed to be. And the next one is benefit of CIPD membership if a member at some point has a career break within HR or moves to another career role. I think when it comes to then the benefit, that's going to be very much a personal decision. As I mentioned before, if you're taking a career break, you do have the option to talk to CIPD then about reduced membership fees as a result of that. But whether you stay a member or not, it's such a personal choice, because I think it's a question of, you know, you're moving to another role. It's kind of like a sideways move to build up some experience and to then segue back into a different HR role or at a different level, or is it, no, I'm walking away from HR, right? So it's going to be very personal, I think. But if you have any reason to need access, for example, to the research and all of the reports, the journals, there's you know, the employment law support line, and the other helplines, those things can be helpful to you, not just within a strict HR role as well. So again, I think it's just taking into consideration whatever that change is, and what would work best for you in that case. Got some different points. I don't know if I've got any more questions. Have I missed any questions?
There was one about One of the questions on the MCIPD assessment form is about a difficult decision. How would you advise needing to hit the criteria whilst not being able to share many details given the sensitivities? I guess my advice would be that you have to sort of frame it in a way that you're not revealing any confidentiality. So you'd have to refer to, employee A or employer A. For example, when you're talking about it, you might have to talk very generically about what the issue was. If it was discrimination, you might not say it was racial discrimination or sexual discrimination. You might just say it was discrimination, and just trying to keep it very unidentifiable as possible, really. Redacting information on if you're sharing documents or evidence.
Okay.
Not sure if you've got any other thoughts, Emma.
I think that was a very complete answer. I'm going to leave it at that one. I don't know if there's anything else here. I think I'm at the end now. My chat keeps acting up, but I think that was the last question, was it not?
There was one about what level of qualification do you have to have for chartered? Is it level 5 or level 7? I'm not sure.
Well, it could go either way, to be fair, because essentially what you have to think about is, even though you can do it through the qualifications, go the qualification route, there's still going to be the question of experience. So it's like, if you complete a level 5, you still get the associate level. If you do the advanced, you still get associate level, but then you've got the opportunity to then potentially upgrade by showing what your experience is. So it's not something that's just going to come automatically from doing the qualification. But generally speaking, I mean, if you kind of think about it, is I would say that level 3 and level 5, it's changed now, right? Because with level 3 now, that's looked at a foundation member. So we've got a new level of membership. And then you would look at the equivalent of the old level 5 then as being associate. So basically, when you get to chartered, you're looking at level 7. And there's not something beyond that other than specialized certificates that could potentially, obviously, specialized qualifications that could potentially be useful as well. So the level 7 now, if I'm not mistaken, is called the advanced diploma, because the naming has changed. Okay.
Yeah. There was a question from Danielle about, do you have to become a chartered member before chartered fellow, or if when you're assessed for a membership level, but you're actually operating at fellowship level, would that be the potential outcome? I think the answer to that is you have to go through the steps. You have to go to member and then to fellow. I think if you've been assessed for member, that's all you've been assessed for.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be like, oh, well, you should have gone for fellow because you've sort of followed the member process. But it doesn't mean that you have to become a member before you become a fellow. Because again, it's a question of like your personal choices and how you're operating within HR or
so you
L&D
could skip
or OD.
member level and just go straight up to fellow.
Yeah, there are people who've done that. In fact, I know somebody who they did end up doing the member. They could have gone straight to fellow, but they decided they wanted to do the member process because they felt that that was important to kind of brush up, get kind of prepared to feel more confident going into the fellow. So there was only, I think, like a year and a half or something difference in them doing the two, maybe a year. So because again, it's about your experience and what you're doing. So if at the end of the day you apply for chartered fellow and you can demonstrate I'm operating at chartered fellow level, that's all that's needed. But it is an interesting question. I'm pretty sure I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure there isn't there isn't a case of kind of going for member and then somebody saying, oh no, you should really be fellow, because you've got to think about the criteria that you're hitting for that is targeted to that level. So I don't see that being a possibility, but it's a good question.
It's good. And Felina or Sally has answered it in the chat and said exactly that. So yeah.
Excellent. See the power of community. This is why you network. This is why you talk to other people. No one person has all the answers. Absolutely. All
Is
right.
reduced membership fees also available to a member that moved outside HR role but wants to keep access to their membership rather than trying to rejoin again later in the future?
Okay, so I think that's Steve clarifying a bit more from the previous question. As far as I know, whether or not you're in an HR role at that point wouldn't make a difference, because at the end of the day, it's about membership. But I'm not 100% sure on that. So I think that's the question. If you want to connect with me, I'm happy to follow that up with you. Or if you want to contact the CIPD membership team directly, they're going to be able to give you a more definitive answer, I think, around that. Because obviously part of the thing is, because I'm also thinking it's like, even if you've moved out of that role, it doesn't mean that you're not coming back into an HR role, and doesn't mean you don't still need the support and the access to information that you get through CIPD membership. So to kind of drop that membership and then have to kind of go through some sort of process to rejoin doesn't seem particularly logical to me, but I might ought to not say that, not actually knowing 100%.
And then
Okay.
the final questions were just about costing to upgrade. So Sally's answered those. And the Charter Fellow, I think, was £250 for the telephone assessment. So we've got the ones there for a Charter member as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Sally. And yes, I love the comment. The telephone assessment is worth every penny. Exactly, because that's what I was saying earlier, right? Because it gives you that opportunity to clarify anything that needs to go into depth a bit more. So it's beneficial for you and for the assessor, making sure that they've got that full picture of what you've been doing. So that's really key. Okay, fabulous. I can see that we are short on time. It doesn't look like there are any more questions. So we've got a non-CIPD related question. I love it. All
Just
right,
have a
challenge
chat.
me, Catherine. I know, right? What's the meaning of life? No, I can't answer that. What color is on Lynn's walls?
Some Dulux grey one. Nothing fancy like Farrow and Ball or anything like that.
It does look really nice, though.
Message me, Catherine, and I will send you a picture of the tin. Find me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Just demonstrating once again, networking has so many benefits to it, right? Knowledge in all areas, not just HR. Absolutely. All right. So I did have sort of a catch-up thing on Mentimeter that I was going to do at the end, but I know that some people have had to leave as well. And I'm thinking it's probably better, since we're all out here and kind of chatting anyway, to just kind of move into the networking part for anybody that does want to stay. I was going to say as well, in theory, we've been recording the session, so you will get the recording once it's downloaded. There can usually be a bit of a delay there. And obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm sure Lynn would be happy for people to connect to her as well. Any questions you have, just reach out to the branch. And I also want to say a big thank you to Julia, Lauren and Sally, who have been making everything possible and answering your questions and interacting with you in the chat as well. So big thanks to them. And of course, to Lynn as well, for sharing her story and for sticking around to answer your questions. So absolutely, we'll just move into networking. So anyone who wants to stick around, we'll turn off the recording. So that part won't be will be confidential. And then yeah, just stick around and we'll chat. And if not, then we hope that